Support for the Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you in part by University of Idaho, Idaho's only Carnegie R1 classified research university. Our Carnegie R1 designation recognizes the discoveries we make that help our forests thrive. It means we're creating more doctors and doing real research to strengthen cybersecurity for Idaho businesses, our energy sector, and every Idahoan. More at go.uidaho.edu/Idaho-is-Idaho.
The Winter Olympics are back, and Boise State Public Radio Music is celebrating the 25th Games in Milan Cortina.
Welcome to the 25th Winter Olympic Games.
NPR is covering the Games from Italy, bringing you the stories behind the competition now through February 22nd.
It's been amazing being here with Team USA.
From new events to medal counts and Team USA's highlights, follow it all with NPR's 2026 Winter Olympics coverage at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. You're listening to Idaho Matters. After a rare regulatory reversal, Moderna's experimental mRNA flu vaccine is now back under review by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, spotlighting tensions over scientific standards, vaccine regulations, and the future of mRNA technology in routine immunizations. Well, it's Wednesday, which means Dr. David Pate is joining us today. He is the former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and the co-author of the book, Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. Hi, Dr. Pate.
Hi, Gemma.
Now, folks, remember, if you have a public health question for Dr. Pate, send us an email, idahomatters@boisestate.edu. Okay, Dr. Pate, so let's kind of go back a little bit because the FDA initially refused to review Moderna's application. They said the company used what regulators considered the wrong comparison vaccine in its clinical trial. So can you walk us through why the FDA declined the filing in the first place? And then what changed to all of a sudden say, well, we're going to review this anyway?
Well, what happened is that these vaccines take many years to develop. And millions, if not billions of dollars to develop. And so you don't just do this whole process over 4 or 5 years and then just show up to the FDA and say, okay, here's my study. What do you think? You walk through the process with FDA experts all the way because you want to make sure that you're doing things in a way that they will accept, that meets their standards, that is going to pave the way so that you're not just doing an all or nothing bet on this drug or vaccine. And Moderna had done that. They had worked with the experts. They had designed the study to meet FDA standards. They had agreed on what would be the comparator because it's very typical once we have a drug available or a vaccine available, you no longer compare your new drug or vaccine to a placebo because that means that the group that's going to get placebo isn't going to get something when we know we have something that works. So we have a long-standing practice that goes back for many decades that if there's already, so let's say it's a cancer drug and we have a new cancer drug. Well, you wouldn't tell those cancer patients, okay, we need some volunteers not to get any treatment. That no one would sign up. You'd say,
right,
we're going to test our new drug versus the other. So the FDA agreed. Now, when they submitted it at the very end, an administrator that is very well known to those of us that study anti-vaxxers, he just denied it out of hand. That has never happened. And I suspect the reversal is due to the fact that they know this, they would have been creamed in litigation if they didn't reverse this.
So, Dr. Pate, from a medical and regulatory perspective, then, how important is consistency from agencies like the FDA? And what impact do you think, these kinds of public disagreements have on trust in vaccines right now?
Well, it's hurting trust in vaccine because now it looks like there are people high up in government that, people will say, well, wait, they've got concerns, so it's totally reasonable for me to have concerns. The problem is their concerns aren't reasonable. Um, the other problem, the bigger problem, that what I feared is I don't think your listeners can appreciate unless they are involved in this field, either studying it or in research, how close we are to some pretty major advances in medicine. We have learned tons about immunology, vaccinology. We have new understanding of how we can make better vaccines that actually could have a better chance of preventing infections, not just making them milder. And we have evolving understanding of now how we could take this mRNA vaccine technology and not just use it for infectious diseases, but actually use it to treat cancer that we don't have other options for and other things. We are so close. The consequence, if this decision had stood, would be that it would send the message to all drug manufacturers, vaccine manufacturers, that you can't have trust in the system. You can't know, even if they tell you, if people in the department tell you that what you're doing is fine, it could be turned down at the last minute. And so what would happen is companies aren't going to make risky bets. They're not going to invest in drugs for rare conditions, for rare cancers, and certainly not for vaccines, which, despite what some would tell you, is not a hugely profitable line of business. And so they would just stop investing in it. What Moderna had said they were going to do is just offer their new vaccine to the rest of the world, and it wouldn't be available in the United States. But that's not sustainable for most drugs and vaccines.
So this review comes amid broader changes in federal vaccine oversight under Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., alongside calls for stricter vaccine scrutiny rather. So, Dr. Pate, how does political leadership and policy priorities intersect with scientific decision making? At these agencies that are supposed to be evidence driven.
Well, I think the problem is science has never been or intended to be political. In other words, science isn't subject to ideology. If I am of the belief that gravity doesn't exist, well, I'm going to be proven wrong very quickly, because we know from science gravity exists. It's a law of nature. It's physics. It works. So it should be science, not politics. Now, where politics comes in to play is, what are the things that we want to direct in terms of our research priorities, and those kinds of things. But what the science is shouldn't be. And that is what is different now. We have people who are not physicians, not scientists, not vaccinologists, not immunologists, who don't really have a good understanding of it. And some people that do have a good understanding, but they have significant personal interests in vaccines not being approved because they can sell other things. And when those people are the ones that are put in the position of deciding our science and which science to accept, and what science to believe, then we end up with rather shocking kinds of behaviors, like what happened when this Moderna application was just turned down. But also, when I listened to the new head of the vaccine committee for the CDC suggests that maybe we need to not use some of these vaccines and just do natural experiments to see how the disease plays out. Well, we already know how these diseases play out. I have told your listeners for years now, I know what will happen. I can tell you right now what will happen if we don't vaccinate for polio, if we don't vaccinate for measles, and we're seeing it right now. We we don't need to restudy this. Kids are ending up in the hospital. Kids are dying. Kids are going to have complications.
So let's go back to if this mRNA vaccine is approved, Dr. Pate, because it could eventually become part of a combined, my understanding is COVID flu shot. So how significant would that be for public health? I mean, how could it realistically, not improve just vaccination rates, but maybe, seasonal protection, right? Because as we saw
Right.
this season, right, we've seen such a big influx of so many people with influenza B in particular, and it's because scientists couldn't keep up with the vaccine with the vaccine needing to be changed. I know I'm simplifying, but what could this mean?
Oh yeah, oh, no, you're on to the right point. Well, first of all, as you said, one thing is that Moderna's vaccine now it needs to be reviewed. The study results need to be reviewed, but it showed superiority compared to an approved vaccine, and that is something that we should all want is a even better influenza vaccine because our influenza vaccines have been good, but they haven't been great. So that's one thing. Number two is exactly the point that you're raising, and that is what you and I talked about with your listeners is that we saw this influenza virus changing very significantly over the summer. Now, to put things in perspective for your listeners, we are making a decision about next year's flu shot right now. Our government is. Our government is deciding what should be the strains of flu that we cover for next year. And that vaccine will come available this fall. And it will take, the reason we're making that decision right now is it will take all of that time to make and distribute the vaccine because most of our technology is growing what we need for the vaccine on chicken eggs. And it takes many months. And as you and I have talked about, that's fine in a regular influenza year. What if we were to have bird flu and all of a sudden need to make it and you don't have birds making chicken eggs? So mRNA gives us another technology. The other thing is we had no time to change the vaccine this year. When we saw it changing, we knew it was going to be more severe and we knew it wasn't going to be a perfect match. If we had the mRNA, we would have had time to make a brand new flu vaccine that would have given a match to what we've been dealing with this flu season. You can do that with mRNA. You can't do it with chicken eggs. The third thing is that if we are going to be prepared for a new pandemic, potential pandemic, and let me just remind your listeners, most of the time our pandemics are influenza viruses. They can certainly be other things. We've seen it with coronaviruses, but most often it's influenza viruses. If we're going to be prepared for a future pandemic, you need to respond quickly. The reason we had a vaccine within a year of the novel coronavirus in 2019 is that we could use the mRNA technology. If we had to do standard technologies, we would really not have been able to respond nearly as quickly as we did.
Mm. So I want to turn now to the other big public health news, and that's the fact that the measles continues to spread across the United States. And Dr. Pate, as of February 12th, the CDC confirmed 910 cases that have been reported across the United States just in 2026. And South Carolina is leading with more than 600 confirmed cases, which is about 70% of the nation's total. But, there are confirmed cases across the U.S. And in fact, just this month, there's been reporting that a possible measles exposure was reported at the Philadelphia International Airport and at multiple tourist sites in D.C. So why is this continuing to spread? And is there a way to stop the spread outside of getting a vaccine? Because we have hesitancy to vaccines right now in our country.
So the reason it's continuing to spread is that this is the most contagious virus that we know of that infects humans, the measles virus. It is the most infectious. And second is we have declining vaccine rates. So what it means is you're pairing the most infectious virus that we know of, the virus that is most efficient at transmitting from one person to another. So that what we mean by that is that in general, if you took somebody with measles, you put them around people who were not protected, you would expect that one case will infect another 12 to 18 people. That's how infectious it is. And then if you combine that most infectious virus we know of with low vaccine rates, and they don't have to be that low for measles because it's so infectious, we need to have roughly 95% of the population protected, but we're falling down into the low 90s, perhaps in some states even into the high 80s, which is not going to be enough to protect these outbreaks. So we are seeing outbreaks. There's only two ways to control an outbreak like that. One, vaccines. Two, is you just let it burn through. And you're just going to get, and that's the approach that our government is largely taking, is that just let kids get infected. They're going to have immunity. The problem is we are having kids get complications. We are having kids get hospitalized. And we won't see all the complications from measles for years. And so here's what I think is going to happen. We're going to have one of two things happen. First of all, measles normally has a seasonality. So typically, by sometime in the spring, measles transmission usually drops considerably. And then it increases again in late winter. So one of two things is going to happen. One, we're going to still see high levels of transmission with more and more cases. That's going to mean that we have lower rates of vaccine than we even think, and that these kids are continuing to spread it. The other possibility is that we could see a decline, and then people think, oh, okay, it's all over with, only to have a huge surge come this fall and winter. So that's what I'm going to be watching for, and that's what's going on now.
So, Dr. Pate, it is the middle of February, which is Heart Health Month. And I wanted to take the next few minutes, if we could, to talk about this, because heart disease actually kills more women than any other condition. And I know that can be really surprising for folks because awareness remains really surprisingly low. So I'm curious about why you think that gap between risk and awareness still persists to this day.
I think it's multifactorial. I think that, first of all, one of the problems we have in healthcare is if people don't understand that they could be at risk for something, they typically don't do a lot of research or trying to understand it. So, you kind of have a chicken and egg thing. The other thing is, I think there's just so much competing for our attention right now that it's really hard to get attention. And a lot of the women who we would like to get their attention about things like this, they're working. They got, kids they're taking to baseball or football. They're going to cheerleading. They're, all kinds of activities. They're taking care of a home, all kinds of things. And the demands on women are just so much. So I think that there's just been, and people today of both genders just don't get information the same way that we used to. You could put an article in a newspaper or in a magazine, a women's magazine or what, but who does that anymore? So it's really changed how we need to communicate and how can we get people's attention.
So, Dr. Pate, research also shows that women, not always, but often experience heart attacks differently than men. I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, you were always told, like, oh, a sharp pain in your left arm, right? There was pain in your jaw. I mean, things like that. What symptoms should women be especially alert to?
Yeah, just first of all, women can have typical symptoms. So, certainly, if you are having chest pain, and typically that would be over the left side of the chest, and it might radiate to the arm, it might radiate to the shoulder, might radiate up to your jaw, and and one way to know that pain is radiating. So, for example, let's say you feel the pain is in your upper arm, but when you squeeze your upper arm, that's not making the pain worse. That's what we're talking about. It may be referred. Or same thing for your jaw. You don't really, when you're touching your jaw, feel the pain, but you feel the pain is located there. That's referred pain. So that's one thing. Second, any symptoms that you're noticing with exertion. So maybe you're carrying things, maybe you're going out for a walk, and you notice that, oh boy, I seem to be getting short of breath, or maybe I've gotten some pain, my back, or maybe I've gotten nauseated. And so it could be atypical symptoms like that are not necessarily pain, but you're feeling it with exercise, some kind of activity, climbing the stairs, carrying groceries, going for a walk. And then noticeably, that you sit down to rest and it goes away. Those would be very concerning for heart disease. And so just be sensitive to your body. Women typically are more sensitive. When you notice something that's a change, then, my wife used to always worry, I don't want to go to the doctor and then find out it's nothing wrong. They'll just think I'm whiny or whatever. First of all, I've never thought that about patients. But second of all, I said, well, that's how you'll feel if you're wrong. How will you feel if we're right and there's a heart problem and you don't get attention? So be sure if you notice something's different, get attention. Don't worry about it. We are happy to tell you that it's not something serious. We'd much rather tell you that than a heart problem.
Well, and Dr. Pat, I think you bring up some really good points too, because also the studies are showing that women, are less likely to report chest pain. I mean, they'll say, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable," or as you mentioned, all of these, other multiple symptoms. So then, how does that then potentially complicate a diagnosis? In an emergency setting, right? I mean, I've not experienced that, but I mean, I'll go back to anecdotally when I had my appendix out last March. My son had suffered from appendicitis. My symptoms were so incredibly different than his. I just thought I was having menstrual cramps, but it just wasn't going away. And just like your wife, I was like, well, I don't want to go to the emergency room and just have them tell me, it's cramps. And I mean, good thing I went, right? But
Exactly.
So how does that complicate a diagnosis, if you're in an emergency room?
Well, it can. I think the first thing is understand your risks. So, if you have a family, particularly in first degree relatives, brother, sister, mom, dad, of heart disease, especially heart disease under the age of 50, that's significant. Also, if you are overweight, have had high blood pressure, not well controlled, maybe you have diabetes. If you have ever been a smoker, that is going to increase your risk. So, first of all, understand if you have risk. Now, that doesn't mean don't get attention if you don't have risk, but when you do have risk, make sure you bring that to the attention of the doctor or the nurse when you get to the emergency room or urgent care, wherever you are, just so that everybody understands. The second thing is, I've known for a long time women are much tougher than men, and so women tend to downplay symptoms. And just like you said, Gemma, Whereas a man will say, "Oh, I'm having pain. Like this is just
Uh
like
huh.
you could not possibly understand how much pain I'm having." Women, on the other hand, will say, "Well, it's not really a pain. It's a little pressure, or I just
Mm-hmm.
feel a little squeeze." But don't minimize. And women, you know, that's pain. Call it what it is, and just call it out. And there's nothing wrong with you doing it, and that's going to help.
So, Dr. Pate, historically as well, cardiovascular research has focused mostly on men. Um, so, how has that, in your opinion, affected, what we know, right, and what we still need to learn when it comes not just to women's heart health, but frankly, women needing to understand that they are also at risk for heart disease? Because I will tell you, when I was growing up, it was such a male focused disease.
Well, that's absolutely right. And I think, a couple things. First of all, a lot of the studies that had men, first of all, there definitely was a gender bias that goes way back. And I think that, men typically were heavier smokers. And
Mm,
there were some reasons why there were concerns about that. But now, as smoking has decreased across the population, we really see that it's not as big a difference now as it was before, and that this is a very important disease and cause of death in women. So that's heightened. The second thing is, sometimes when you're doing studies, you want kind of the typical patients with the typical things, and like we said, women get what we call atypical. But frankly, given the size of the population of women, we really shouldn't be calling it atypical, because actually that's now the typical. But that's what has confounded some of these studies, and I think there just wasn't an understanding. Well, why would women be different than men when it comes to the heart? I mean, we understand why reproductive issues would be different, but why would the heart be? And it is different. And so that's a learning, and that's why we've got to focus much more on these distinctions between men and women and not treat them all the same.
and then, Dr. Pate, what about the role of self advocacy? And what I mean by this is that I think as women, we're very good about advocating, for our spouse, for our kids when it comes to their health, right? Um, but sometimes that doesn't roll over into advocating for ourselves in the medical system. And so, even as I think clinicians are still, not necessarily learning about heart disease and women, but I think our culture is still so centered on it still kind of being a male issue. How important is it that women, are advocating, and there is space for women to say, I don't like, something feels off. And and I know that sounds kind of general, but I know every time there's something wrong with me, I'm like, something just doesn't seem right."
Yeah, first of all, Jimmy, you're making such a great point. As a physician, who my specialty was as a diagnostician, what really would nag at me is when somebody who was very familiar with their body would tell me, "Now, there's something that's off. There's something that is different." Make that clear, because that will make a difference. The second thing is, I do understand, and like I said, my wife was this way. That she didn't want to make a fuss about something, didn't want people to do this big workup and find out there was nothing wrong with her. Let me tell you this, women, think about it in a different light. Think about it if something happened to you. Do you know how helpless your husband would be? I mean, think about it for a minute. All right, do you really want something to happen to you, and now your husbands are going to be in charge of your kids, getting them ready for school, getting them to is that what you want? What about your kids? What are they going to do without their mother? When you start thinking about it a different way, but a way that you're already used to is you're worried about your family. Think of it in that light, and think of it that the reason you have to take care of yourself is that family's going to fall apart without you. So speak up. Getting you the attention is actually taking care of your family.
I always say I am my family's true North Star, whether they want to believe it or not, Dr. Pate. So,
Amen.
well, as always, we so appreciate you, Dr. Pate. You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudette.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, host of Fresh Air. Hey, take a break from the 24-hour news cycle with us and listen to long-form interviews with your favorite authors, actors, filmmakers, comedians, and musicians, the people making the art that nourishes us and speaks to our times. So listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.